Hello, everyone. Thanks for being here. This is Rachel Roumeliotis from Punch Tape. We are going to be talking about content strategy for startups today. And there's a lot of best practices that I'm going to go over here that would be good for individual that are entrepreneurs, bigger companies, but we are going to shade this a little bit towards sort of the startups. Certainly, I think these could hold true for anyone in series A, B, C. So there is there is a best way to put together a content strategy for startups, especially when time and money are constrained, and with um, the new AI tools and services that are out there, and what still holds true about people who are looking for products or solutions that can help them in their daily lives, attention span, and how to really speak to speak to all of that. So, a little bit about me. I recently started Punch Tape September 2025, and we're sort of like a three-pronged business. One is doing events, another is podcasts, and another is doing client work. So if there is something here that looks great that you can't do yourself or you want to partner with someone, we are happy to be that partner. Previous to that, I was at Intel and I was director of open source strategy. And a lot of that was working on open source projects, aligning open source across the company, and it's a huge company, as you well know, and messaging and educating internal folks at Intel about open source. And it was really great. Previous to that, I was 12 years at O'Reilly Media, working as an editor at first and then helping to lead the content team and did a lot of content strategies for them for different markets and also created conferences and chaired some conferences. So that was great. And that's all about me. Okay. So first things first, totally get it. Content strategy is probably not your first go to thing when you are a startup. So I just want to say I get that. And actually, that's a lot about how you want to start with your consumers, that you actually see them and that you understand their plight and their perspective and where they're at. So when you're a startup, not that I've been one outside of this company that I'm starting to create, but of course, you have product development, right? There's the reason you started the company in the first place, right? What is the story? What prompted you to go ahead and put everything together and spend your time and probably some of your money and others' money in putting this together? You need to, of course, think of what your hiring needs are, engineering, if there's any administration, financial. Again, you see where I'm going here. Content isn't necessarily first thing. You may or may not sporadically pull together a piece of content on why you founded the company, something on where it came from, what you're doing. You may speak at a conference. Great things. Nothing wrong with that. But there is a better way to do it. Gen AI tools can be great. They can help with derivatives. We'll talk about that later. They can also be not so helpful if they're putting out slop, right? Then there's also lots of people. I'm sure if you're working at a startup or you founded a startup or you're co-founder, you're a very smart person. That doesn't necessarily mean that that translates to A, content strategy, or B, that that's where you should be spending your time. People may have different opinions, and it's the kind of thing where I'm imagining you might, like I was saying, you might make a great content piece, amazing content piece. But if that's sort of like a flash in the pan and you do one thing and then leave it, it's not really helpful in the long run. So, what is a content strategy? Okay, so here I kind of broke it down into what it is and what it isn't. And let's start with actually what it is not, because we kind of touched upon that. It isn't, that one amazing editorial, post from the founder that talks about, the lightning strike of the idea. As much as that's amazing and may get, a couple, tens of thousands of views, it's not really gonna, it's not a content strategy. It's not gonna help overall. It's not any one LinkedIn post. It's certainly not all AI generated content, although that can be a partner for you in this. It's not even an editorial calendar where you say, for this month, we're going to talk about widget A, and then we're going to talk about widget B and C, etc. And it's also not the finely honed copy that you put together on your website, which could be also amazing. Okay. So what it is it's definitely it's a well thought out, and as I have here, clear and standardized product narrative. It is basically an agreed upon, that's something I didn't put here either. Agreed upon way of seeing what type of solution, how it helps the person, who it's helping, and what it's bringing to the industry that you're in. So and it's written down, right? I didn't put that here either, but it's certainly written down. It positions your product as essential in its own way, essential to solving the problem that it is, coming into the industry to solve. And it shows you how to take that inspiration and that energy that you put into that possibly one post and gives you guidance for how do you repeat that? What is the right cadence for doing things? Why are you doing things? Who is your audience? What do they need? And thinking about, and this will be very familiar to marketers, what is top of funnel, mid funnel, down funnel? And I also like to think about pre top of funnel. That's actually one of my most favorite areas, which I don't think we get into here, but is I think super important because again, it's about connecting with your customer or consumer. Okay, so I've touched upon a few of these. There are some traps, I think. I don't think necessarily these are going to close the business down, but they certainly could stop it from growing in a way that content can actually lead to revenue growth and client growth and becoming part of the zeitgeist. So having only founder led content. This is something that I find really interesting. Founders are fascinating. Obviously, they're unique and inspiring people. I think you want to have your founder voice as part of your content strategy. And what you don't want is it's not about that one founder anymore exclusively, right? It's about a company, and a company is producing a solution or a product. A company is made up of different people, it's made up of services. And I think while it's good to have that voice in the mix, you do want to have other voices. I think you also want to have that voice coming from, the main communication channels and not necessarily just that one. Though I get why people fall into this trap, right? So, like, one of the reasons that a startup is going to get money and is going to start to bring in customers is that founder and is that founder's network. So, I think there's a way to keep it genuine and keep that helping you to move towards shifting that energy to the company and getting that community built around the company rather than just the founder, which I think is really important. Maybe not at the very, very beginning, but I think there's certainly a point in growth where that is really, really important. Random content, right? Like I said, it's great. I think it's great to speak at, say, a certain conference that really makes sense for you. I think it's great to have an inspiring report. I think it's great to do video, right? Short videos all the time. But if it's not consistent, it's not going to stick, right? Even if it really, really hits home, if it's not something that's consistent and trustworthy, it's not going to help. Thinking through well, you're just going to do this with AI tools. Don't worry about it. That's going to be how you're going to do it. Not okay. And again, all of these traps I think are valid, and I can see why they happen. Starts and stops, like, okay, I get it. We're going to do the content. We're going to put it together. You do it for 3 months and you stop. I don't think there's necessarily harm done, but motivation and acceleration is lost from what you're doing. Which brings me to also, keeping content up to date and stuff. I think that's a trap too. I didn't even write that down here. Having content that maybe is out of date, or leading people to some, a dead link or something like that. I think that's almost worse than having no content at all. To be debated. Okay. So I think the 3 questions to really start you off, when you're thinking through this and building out your strategy is, who is your product for specifically? And I do mean specifically, right? So let's just take, you are making some solution for some portion for cloud architects. Fantastic, right? So sure, your audience is cloud architects. It's not all of them, right? So while I think you want to get noticed by cloud architects, You really want to catch cloud architects that are doing A, B, and C. Let's just say they're migrating to the cloud. So you really want to understand that the people that you're looking for are cloud architects, great, but you want to find them in time or where they're at, right? Where they aren't just reading like, that's interesting. You want to identify this I would call top of funnel content. You want to identify that a certain percentage of, in this case, cloud architects have an issue. And that issue is, say it's A, B, or C, like there, it doesn't have to be one specific thing. So A, B, or C, and that you are talking to them about how you understand that that's an issue, the steps that one could take to solve the issue, and then at the end, making sure that you mention, how the tool helps you with that, right? So having that specific person in that specific time and space, I think is really interesting and important for if you want to take those people to from sort of passing by and reading something and say it's interesting and taking the next step to I want a demo, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. Or giving you them any sort of information, right? What problem are you solving? Be specific, be showcase that. Like I said, I mean, you want to, obviously, you are a business and you have a solution and you want to be able to tell people about your solution. But I think before you get to that point, again, top of funnel content, you want to say that I understand who you are, where you are, how you're thinking through things. Here's a few ways that might solve your problem in a technology agnostic way, maybe introducing something, technology that's new even, right? And so there's some educational pieces there. And then saying, oh, we do have a solution to that works with A, B, and C. It's always good to do what I call the peanut butter and jelly, right? It's not a standalone, it's not peanut butter, it's not jelly, but if you smash it all together, it's like a delicious sandwich, delicious solution. So making sure that you have that. And then what is your defining narrative? I don't think it can be like, oh, we can solve everything and we can solve that and we can solve that, right? So again, it's being specific. I think there's a point where there is the pre-funnel content where you're educating people about a new technology. You're saying to all the cloud architects, great, we get it. You have these 5 problems. Wonderful. Well, with this one problem, we're going to actually help you out. We're going to dig in a little bit, right? And I think it's sometimes when I've seen content that is intended to be top of funnel and drive people into that sort of buying pipeline, it's uh, it's not specific enough. It's not detailed enough. It's not the person that's reading it is not seeing their situation. Like, what is their motivation to give you an email, look at a demo? You're asking them to do something, which is a big deal, right? It's one thing to like read something. Are they even reading it all? You know what I mean? But they're only going to take steps if they need something like that day, that week, that month, right? So I think that's really important when you're looking through that because the content strategy shouldn't sit outside and be sort of nice to have. It should be a part of how you're driving marketing and sales to bottom line. Okay. So our framework, which is simple, and like I said, a lot of this would hold true for, I think, a lot of different people, but this is sort of a little bit more of the execution of it, right? There is a ton of noise, like super annoyingly, and it's hard to cut through it, right? There's certain ways, like you sign up for certain things, you listen to certain people, you go to certain social media channels, right? But there just is a lot. And I think that's just everywhere. So, how do you identify those insights that cut through that noise and that someone actually sees, right? I think that's a couple of things. I think one is exactly identifying that particular person and how you can help that particular person by almost being like a mirror to them, right? Being like, "Hey, you're having a problem with this, aren't you?" And they're like, "Me?" And you're like, "Yeah, you," right? Okay. So I think that's true. I do think there's also dependent upon whichever channel you're looking at, like there's best practices, right? Like I mean, it's just pointless to write a message on LinkedIn, for instance, where there's no image. Just kind of fly right by that, right? So you do need to think about, and this is where AI tools can help and come in. Do you put together an image that has a quote that that gets somebody? Do you put like some like fat cat that's super funny saying something? I did that once. How do you catch literally just how do you, as someone scrolling, catch someone's attention? And I think it can be silly, it can be certain colors, and it can be, a quote. It could be, like, "We solve your problem." I don't know, right? So I think that's just a couple with cutting through the noise, I think, is identifying that specific solution and problem situation and the person you're looking for. But I do think there is a component where AI can help. Like, if you're not, an artist or a designer and it doesn't make sense necessarily, like maybe you've had someone work on your brand and spin that up. Maybe you don't have someone to do that for social media. So that might be where you would look to like a Nano Banana or a Claude or something like that to put together Mid-Journey, to put together some designs for you that maybe are derivative from your brand and use the same colors. How do you turn these ideas into repeatable formats? So we talked a little bit about that, right? On the design side. But also I think this is where AI can help as well, right? So I think if you put together some really great content, whether that be a report, a couple of videos, whatever it is, right? You don't have to do that from scratch again. There are tools out there like a chat GPT or Claude Artifacts, which I'm doing actually a session on in 2 days, where you can build out, well, you can either ask them a question and say, I have this narrative. Here's this piece of work that I put together. Can you pull out 6 quotes? Can you, create 3 baby blogs? Whatever it is, right? With Claude Artifacts, I was really blown away. And it's not just artifacts, but you can go in there and build something that is a little bit more repeatable, right? So if you want to pull together content piece in your voice, but don't necessarily have the time to, put it through, you can say, take a look at my work that I've done before. This is the point that I want to make, and make sure that, it's original and that you're using these citations, right? And then it helps you get a certain percentage of the way there. It could output a draft, and then you can work from that draft and edit that draft. So that might be an option. But I also think it can pull pieces from it, which I think is really helpful, and it can speed things up a little bit. And then I think something and even I have to remind myself of this, is like, how do you distribute and reinforce content over time, right? And, you have to pick, I think, a couple of social channels where you think and hopefully over time data will prove this out, where your audience is, and really focus on those. And maybe you have one or two where you're doing some experimentation. And then the other thing that, you put out this one good piece of content that you're like, that's really core to, what we're bringing out. And it's so important. And I feel like this is something we repeat with the sales team all the time and to consumers. It's okay, like once a month, to be like, hey, our central narrative, and like with a different picture or with the same picture, and make sure that you're showcasing that content over and over and over again, right? Not literally every day, but and making sure it's going to different channels in different ways. Maybe that's where you've asked AI to create a script and you do like a little YouTube short. So I think those are some really good things. This is the great news, and you probably already know this, is that you already really have all of this, right? It's just not laid out in a way that is agreed upon, that is the best it could possibly be presented, connects all of the dots, etc. Right? So every day, your salespeople are having great conversations where they're at least onboarding some people, right? Because you're still in business, and they're talking to the people that actually need your service or your product. Right? There's gold, right? I mean, I'm sure you've provided them with sales enablement content and tools, right? But like, take a look at those. Those are full of fantastic content. And the response that you get back, why or why not that client is going to be, purchasing your service or product, the issues that come up with it. So that is just so full of content. And that is something that you're going to see ongoing, right? Oh, and I basically say that in the next. So, so those 3 things. Then there's product decisions, right? Like, why are you making those decisions? I think that giving people, like pulling back the curtain a little bit and showcasing why you made a decision, why you didn't make a decision, whether it's something that you've already done or something on the horizon, talking a little bit about roadmaps. Again, I think that is really rich content and can give you really like interesting, not just like a flyby, here's a list content, and that people will engage with that. And hopefully someone might be like, oh my God, that's exactly what I need. Or maybe not, right? And maybe that will change what you're doing. You've been to events, no doubt, and you have all of that content. That takes time to do. You have demos, that takes time to do. Those are great things that you can use. You can make content before you get to that video content where you're showcasing them. You can cut those up. They're great. And then, of course, again, founders have amazing insights, right? Like, how do you work that into, different content pieces? How do you grab that in a 15-second video? How do you incorporate that into, a longer report about a certain industry or topic? Okay. So I do think that a structure is important in terms of being consistent and keeping this for the long form. And this is probably, it's not as fun. It's a little bit onerous and maybe not necessarily in your wheelhouse. Again, we're available. But anyways, so when you do this, do take a minute to think systemically and take the pieces of what we've talked about, right? What are the channels you're going to look at? How often are you going to look at people? This is not necessarily the content strategy. This is the execution of it, right? And then putting it out there. But so are you going to do this, right? What is the most important? Say you have, I don't know, five things that you really want to say that are super important. Guess what? Make it three, right? Like don't take so much that you can't do it all at once, right? Again, and I do this myself where I'm like, we're going to do it all and it's going to be amazing. And then 6 months later, you're like, why would I say that? Or 6 weeks later, right? So you want to figure out what is that drumbeat of content. Is part of it is putting together an editorial calendar. Part of it is how do you break things up? How do you reuse content, right? And then I think thinking through those layers, and it might be if you're really, really early, you might not necessarily be further down the funnel yet. Or if you're in a very well established area, you might not have to educate people as much about a certain area before you get to a solution. But do think through those stages, right? Think through, what does your industry need? Is it understood? Are you solving a problem where the problem is well understood and the solutions are well understood, but maybe yours is better, right? So think through, is there general educational content? How do you talk to people about where they're at? How do you then educate them with your demos and maybe how to set up and your first run through? Think through that, right? Don't leave that. Don't, and also don't be like, we're just putting out, top of funnel stuff. You want to have that sort of layered in and being put out there in a sequential way. And I've said a couple times too, like figure out where your audience is. I think you can take some educated guesses at first, and then you're going to look at the data, right? That's another place where there's a lot of AI tooling, which can help you map a customer journey across, across different channels. And what's good about that is you can see, you might get a lot of attention. This happens with me at Reddit, but nothing ever turns into anything. So maybe you're happy to sort of spread awareness, but if you're really looking for people that are ready to implement and make a purchase, maybe it makes sense that you're talking to them on a Slack channel that you've put together or on a GitHub discussion, something closer to where they're able to access if you're open source code, right? Or something like that. I guess too, this structure is also about decisions now that I'm looking at it, right? So being purposeful in what you're going to talk about, who you're talking to, and where it's going to go. And I think, of course, you should, like anything, systematically also every 3 months look at it. I don't know if that's the right cadence for you, but look at it. But it's about making decisions and then moving forward with that structure so that you can then say part A5 of this didn't work. We're going to stop that and do this, or we're just going to stop that. Right. So I think that's really, this is a good one. Sometimes I have an issue with that because I get too excited about stuff. So more is not more, right? You don't have to feel like, my God, we didn't put a blog out today. It should be something that's planned. Also, maybe every day doesn't make sense. It probably doesn't. I'm just telling you now. Does every week make sense? Maybe. Maybe it's every 2 weeks because on the off weeks, you're doing derivative content. You can have longer form anchor content pieces. That could be a report. That could be 1,000-word blog post, right? And then you can chop that up, right? And you can identify the different things. Definitely play with video. That seems to be far and away what people are looking at. And the short form video, I should say. I mean, there's just hundreds more people, as you probably know yourself, as you're scrolling. Look at that, and that catches someone's attention. Again, maybe that's not the one that leads to revenue for you, but something to consider. And then don't just use it once, right? And don't always, that's the other thing that's, I think, good about intention and structure is you don't have to feel like, "Oh, I'm not doing enough. Oh, this company did this and they have this." Maybe there's reasons you don't, right? And I don't think that's a great feeling to have. And you've got other stuff to do. We talked about some of this, right? So Gen AI moving super fast, right? We just had that OpenClaw thing come out, which is like the first quote unquote true AI assistant, but there's all like sorts of security issues. But I'm sure we'll see like tons of things continue to drop. There were new LLMs that dropped into, I think, Claude, and I forget the other one. But today, and probably for the next few months, really good things that I've found working with Gen AI, definitely repurposing, taking something that you've created and producing a summarization, a variation. Those are, they're still not sort of like, do this, great, publish it, right? There still needs to be the human in the loop, which is another thing that I wrote, which I should probably be more systematic about re-putting out there. And then workflow automation, right? Taking some of the, well, I always do this. How do I get, the Gen AI to help get me to point C and not always have to start at point A? Bad stuff. Initial creation, just being like, make a blog click, point them to your website and be like, make a blog post about our company. Probably not going to be good. Could be right, right? It's not going to have any personality. It's not going to have any nuance. Someone had said this, that it's just going to be the lowest common denominator if it gets it right, which is a big if, right? Telling you what is most important about your company, which you probably wouldn't listen to. But anyways, like kind of listening to it. I think it's an interesting way. It can be a voice that you hear. I think it can be a research assistant. It can help you grab information in a way that's different from searching simply on the web. So interesting, but certainly shouldn't be leading the charge, which I really don't think anybody's looking at. Specificity and nuance, like I was saying, it's not going to get it. It's certainly not with something that's new. And how is it going to have that information, right? So I think that's really important. It can start as sort of like a base level. And then I would not have it replace strategy. So I think I haven't so I've been doing this for a long time. I've had the business for 6 months. And it could not replace me right now anyways. I don't know. I like to think, right? Like it has definitely been a partner. It has been helpful in many different ways. But if I were to say, okay, well, you can take it over. Good luck. I'm going to, an island. It would not, it would not make the grade. So I wouldn't use it as like a full replacement of anything right now, actually. That's my opinion. Okay. So great. All this is great. More work. I don't have more time. All right. So what I would say is I do honestly think it's worth the time for content strategy, and that content can play a role in the success and growth of your company. You can start super small as long as you make sure that uh, this is something that's ongoing. And then you can also be modest about your reuse over time and stuff like that, right? Each month decide we're going to do, one blog post on blah, blah, blah. So you have that one post, fantastic. Put it on your website. You can drive everything to that and have a call to action at the end. So when you do that, you can take your favorite flavor of AI and do the repurposing, right? With the human in the loop, like we talked about. You can have them do a summary, have them pull quotes, make a listicle, um, make a script for yourself where you can read it to camera in 30 seconds, right? So you can do all of those things. Um, you can make sure that you have this, a review. How did it do, right? What was the purpose of sending it out? Making sure that it makes sense with what you're doing at the time. And then you can easily set up a way for it, every 2 months, that month that you're doing it, every 2 months, you can set it to go to have a new blog post on LinkedIn, or you can set yourself reminders to mention it in a Slack or a GitHub discussion, right? So you can program those. You can probably, I haven't done this yet, but you could probably make an AI assistant that helps you with that, right? And then get feedback, right? So make sure that it's getting out there and you're listening to hopefully get comments. That would be amazing. But if not, ask some people you know, ask some people you don't know, go back to those sales folks, say, does this make sense? Have some of your clients respond if possible. The real cool thing is when you start to get your clients to write about your product and solution, but I don't think we get there on this one. So, okay, don't do the following. Don't sort of like do that, move forward without a system. It's just going to make it so that you do it for a little while and then you forget or you don't make the most impact that you could, right? It is worth the time, whether it be, 2 hours at one sitting or, a week of deciding to do this. Make sure that you do have some outside perspective, right? I think, if you're in a room and everybody's like, it's the best, I'm in love with our product, it's amazing. No. You do need to have some feedback on, I think, the plan, whether it be, a founder, a colleague, one of your advisors. You do need feedback to make sure that it is reflecting what you think it's reflecting, and what that reflection is good for your business. Someone needs to own that content execution, right? Someone needs, maybe a couple of people help with setting it up, right? But someone needs to make sure that it's happening and then go back and see how it's doing, see what the interaction is like, and make decisions moving forward. Also, do not blindly use AI tools, right? If you make a really great blog post and then you chuck it through one of those things and it gives you 10 baby posts or whatever, however you're going to use it, and you don't read those, that's not going to work well. I had one thing where like it thought that the audience was like young adults, and I was like, where did I get that? It was very odd. Okay, so don't do that. That's really important. So a little bit more about us, because this is an opportunity where I've made an asset, right? Where we can talk a little bit about us. So we can help you build your strategy by talking to you. We can be that outside neutral voice where we're helping you to clarify your storylines. We can do that focused work on sort of helping you to identify through who that audience is, like kind of making that translation between like, this is why we created our company and how do you get that out on the screen, whether it be through text or audio or video. And then also we can help you create those AI enabled or enhanced workflows. So we can do all of that. And we have really small packages for startups as well. And I just thought it would be fun to do that with startups. Okay. So final words of wisdom here. I hope some of this was helpful. I think this is my last slide, minus the last boom punch tape slide. Be clear about your audience. And like I said, being clear it's cloud architects. It's cloud architects who are in a particular situation, who need to solve a problem, et cetera, et cetera. Again, that's important if the content that you're focused on, which I think is fine, is about top of funnel and then driving them through a pipeline to revenue. Remember, educate your audience, be a mirror back to them that you understand who they are. Don't make it just be about like, hey, our thing's going to help you. You should buy it, right? That's just going to come off as salesy. It's not going to endear you to your clients. I think it's something that, I don't know, I've seen a spectrum whether people do it or not. Just make sure not to do it. You do need workflows. I think it's fine. You do need to have like something repeatable or you're going to forget it. You're not going to engage with it. You're not going to do things over time. And that engagement needs to be ongoing. It's not going to be one post and bam, you've got a full data pipeline. It definitely needs to be ongoing, especially with all the noise out there. So hopefully, I think that's it. Yeah, so that's it. So I think there's some solid advice in there. I tried to make it, agnostic to, I do work in technology, but I think it could be used in other industries as well. I think tried to keep it minimal and understand that this isn't necessarily, again, the first go war startups, but I do think there is an impact. And so that's what I'm hoping, whether, you reach out to us and talk to us about this, which I would love, of course, or whether you do it on your own, it's definitely doable and it's definitely worthwhile. So I do want to thank you for taking the last few minutes to listen to this. And yeah, it's been a pleasure.